Okay, so on to sound design. And again, let's start with the main keys here. Now the sound itself is quite simple. It just sounds really like a sine wave that's been distorted quite heavily. You can really hear that in the original track around about this point here where the melody pitches up. You can hear the first 2 or 3 notes have this very noticeable distortion. Going into the serum patch, I ended up using this kind of pulse wave you get in the basic MG. And this is just a thinner version of like a square wave that you'll find in most synthesizers. In the earlier parts of the drop, it sounds a lot like a sine wave or like a square wave. And then later on, as the filter starts to open up in this section and in the later section here, it sounds a lot more like a saw wave, maybe just with a lot of distortion. The filter's doing most of the work here. Cutoff is very low, 270 Hertz. Resonance is very high. And that's to help accentuate those lower frequencies around the fundamental. I've even got the drive turned up quite a lot in here as well. Keyboard tracking turned on is pretty important for this specific sound. The volume envelope, a little bit of an attack there, 2 milliseconds, no sustain, quite a long decay, and importantly, a fairly long release so that the notes start to spill over into some of the other notes. Envelope 2 here is creating a lot of the punch at the beginning of each of those notes. It's controlling the filter cutoff here very quickly. And it's also in the matrix here affecting the master tuning. Very, very small amount. If I turn this off, again, it's just adding a nice bit of punch. The biggest part of this sound though is the automation. Now I use macros a lot, as you've probably seen before, just because it means you can control multiple things at once. I've got most of my controls mapped to this bright macro one here, and it's affecting the filter cutoff in a positive way. So as we increase the dial, it's going to increase the filter cutoff. It's bringing the resonance down, going the other way, but it's also controlling the release on envelope 1 here. So as it goes up more and more, the notes start to blend together because the release is taking longer to get back to silence. If we look at the track as well, you can see there's a fair bit going on in the automation here. At the beginning, it's very low for that softer, more natural sound. But then like the tail of this note here, you can hear it comes up quite a bit. And you can hear the massive difference really between those two sections. As time goes on, this starts to sound more and more like a saw wave. So that's why I picked that wave table and waveform, because I can filter out all the high frequencies and then just bring them back in if I want to. And it drops back down. And you can hear as it gets closer and closer to the end, it gets brighter and brighter. I've also got the pitch bend turned on down in the bottom right hand corner here on always, and you can see it's on a very low setting of like 6 milliseconds. It may not seem like it's really doing anything, but when you turn it off, you can hear there's a slight difference between them. Now, in the effects, I've not got a lot going on. I've got this EQ that's taking out some of the low frequencies, and this is just because of distortion compared to... Now, the thing about the sound is I was looking around for quite a while online. I saw that actually Duskus has done a few breakdowns of their tracks on their Patreon and other places as well. There may even be an actual tutorial of how this sound is made on there. But when it comes to making a sound like this, the sound has this natural kind of plucky quality to it at the beginning. And comb filters and things like this are very good at recreating those natural plucky qualities because they can add in harmonic frequencies, which a lot of synthesizers are not very good at doing. So I was playing around. I did see that the reverb one might have been used for this, so I was playing around with this. I didn't end up leaving it on though, but if we turn this on, can hear it creates these really nice, interesting tonal shapes into the sound that make it sound a bit more realistic, as if it was a real material. You could also try out a load of these ones inside the flanges folder as well. But to be honest, I left that off, but it is inside the serum patch if you wanted to play around with it. Now let's get on to distortion, because I found that the distortion in serum for the patch that I've got didn't work that well. So I thought I'd use a few other distortion units outside of serum. It sounded like a tape distortion was the main factor in this sound. And so I ended up using this plugin that I saw on a White Sea Studio video. Yeah, White Sea Studio, which you probably will have seen before. And it is free. The manufacturer is called Air Windows. The consolidated version comes with a bunch of different effects, but the one I've been using here is this Pt.2. When I made this track, I actually had the old version, as you can see here, Pt.2 7. There is a new version called Pt.2 8, which you can try out as well. There's not a massive difference between them. And first of all, let's just turn off some of the other effects so you can really hear what it's doing. The distortion adds is very subtle, and it just has like a noisy element to it, this kind of fizzy element in the top, but without it being too bright. And in here, I brought the tape drive up from 0.5. I brought a few of the other elements up too, including the bias as well, which is a really, really nice feature. Not a lot of plugins have a bias control, and have a listen to what it does when I bring this up a lot. And then I also added in RC20. Everything's pretty much turned off. Well, it's not being used. I'm just using the distortion in the middle, the tube pair as well. The focus is down a little bit just so it's not super, super bright, and the mix is down too. And this is just adding that extra layer of distortion on top. Just the combination of those two worked for me. And then I've put the OTT on afterwards, quite low. A bit of compression here, doing a similar thing. But then more importantly come the two delays. So a Valhalla delay, I'm using this again. I've set this to dual mode so that we've got two different delays on the left and right channel, because there's a lot of chaos caused by this main synth. One of the times that's seemingly very obvious is this quarter note triplet timing. Sometimes though, the quarter note triplet notes and delays actually line up with heavily swung notes from our sound. So that's why it does work quite well. And then a dotted eighth note, which is in a similar range to the quarter note triplet here. If you listen to those at full mix, again, they sound quite chaotic, but when they're set quite low with the original, it just creates a bit more of this like dreamy atmosphere, and it makes it sound very wide as well, which is also very nice. On top of that, I added another delay as well. This one is set to the tap mode inside of Valhalla, and this really is just creating chaos. If I bring this up to full mix, they both just add in this nice thick layer underneath. Kind of like a reverb in some ways, but it's not as thick and as heavy as a reverb would be. And just like in the last breakdown, for those that you don't have, of course, all of these plugins, I've made a version of this in Serum here. pretty much using the same controls in the middle here. The main difference is all the processing is done in the effects. But this is the Serum Patch version. And then after that, I've just got Kickstart 2. So if you just have Serum, you can try that out. Let's move on to the drums then, because the drums also have quite a bit of automation on their drum bus. So in the beginning of the track and at a point in the drop, like some points near the end, you get this kind of alternate drum sound where it kind of sounds like the drums are in a room or a space. This is what I mean, this bit at the beginning. Compared to the drop. Now, when listening to this originally, the drums very noticeably had a slight delay to where they should be playing. And I've got the reference track here that I was working off of, and you can actually see that in the original reference. You can see this is our kick drum here, and there's a bit of a delay between this and that bar 9. You can also, though, see how the two left and the right channels have a delay between them as well. If we go to the next kick, it's pretty much the same. The third kick drum, you see now the top channel here, which I think is the left channel, is now a bit later than the right channel. And that kind of goes on and goes on. And then when you look at the drums in the drop, you see the kick is now pretty much bang on where it should be at that bar 25. Flanges in particular will add quite a noticeable delay to, like, say, the left and the right channels to create that flanging effect. So on the drum bus here, I ended up using Valhalla Space Modulator, which is a free plugin. Flicked through a few presets and chose this one called Double Tight. This is before and then after. You can hopefully hear how the drums sound really wide, but they also have that flamming kick drum effect that I wanted to get. And this is automated on and off. As I said before, it plays in the beginning and then it plays here too. The only thing I noticed though, that when this sound is turned on and off or automated in the original track, it didn't sound as bright. So I ended up adding in a phaser as well. And you might be able to notice that in both of these, I didn't automate the plugin to turn on and off. I actually automated the dry wet control, just because sometimes when you automate the plugin to turn on and off, it's instantaneous and it can create a little bit of a pop, especially with plugins like this that add like a delay in. So I've automated the dry wet instead. And the phaser flanger in Ableton has this warmth control, which is what's creating that slightly warmer sound. It filters out some of the higher frequencies as well. A bit of a crazy effect to have in a track because now the kick drum's super, super wide, but it sounds really good, so I would leave it at that. But this is where we come on to the mix bus. So this is where most of the processing is happening. And again, it's all to do with this plugin 2Tape. 2Tape 7, the new one's 2Tape 8. It's pretty much exactly the same if you download it. And let me just show you what this sounds like with this turned off. You can hear how it's doing so much for the track. It's blending all the elements really into this nice cohesive track rather than just individual layers. And that's just because when things like the kick drum play that are very loud and the bass, when they hit, say, the tape distortion, they'll then distort all the other elements that are layered underneath it. Everything will be kind of glued together. And the only things I've really changed in here are the tape drive, the bias, and the encoder mount at the top. So I'll start with the tape drive, the most obvious one. When we bring this up, we're going to get more of that tape distortion, which just has a really soft quality to it. The encoder mount here acts in a little bit of a way like an EQ. So just have a listen to what it sounds like when I bring this up from its default, which is 0.5 to what it was before, which is about 0.6, and I'll go a bit above too. You can hear the higher frequencies are coming up, but not necessarily in the same way as if you just EQ'd the sound. It's like they're being compressed more. And the bias here is what's making the noise and distortion sound quite interesting. If we again bring this down to 0.5. It also has another softening effect on some of those higher frequencies, and it can make some really noisy, nice distortion, which is just perfect for a track like this where it doesn't need to be super clean. I put this on quite early in the process of making the track because I knew it would need some tape distortion, and the good thing about doing this is that when you start to add other instruments and you start to bring the levels up and down, you'll be reacting to what this plugin is doing to all those sounds together. It can be called top-down mixing, where you're working from your main master fade or your mix bus down through the project instead of going up one by one on each element until you work your way up to the mix bus. And for tracks like this, it can just be a bit more effective because it'll probably save you some time. And the two limiters after this, the first one is in mid-side mode. So it's limiting the mid and the side channels differently to each other and just make everything a little bit wide if we turn this off. And then after this is another limiter that's really doing more classic kind of limiting, just controlling loud peaks. Which was at one point doing something, but maybe I've changed some of the settings in this plugin. But I would have this just on at the end, acting really more like a mastering limiter, the final one. And that's the track. The reason I wanted to break this down is because that main synth sound is just a great sound to know how to make, and how you can take a simple melody like that and just extend it out to basically be a full song. It just shows that if you get a really good idea to begin with, you can turn it into a full track very easily just with some creative effects and things like this too. All the downloads, of course, are going to be in the description below and available to anyone that is on our Patreon too. And as I said, the extended version of this video that goes into a little bit more detail on some of the other parts that we missed and some more mixing elements is available on Patreon as well. And thank you to anyone that does sign up to the Patreon, because it is a big support to the channel. As I said, it's just brand new. There's going to be a lot more content coming in the future too. If you like the video as well, make sure to like and subscribe. A lot more track analysis coming, and we've got a brand new course coming in the first half of 2025, which is going to be focused on synthesis and sound design. So make sure to subscribe and you'll be notified when we release that. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.